Anthem! I am well aware that I've probably made one too many videos about it, but this is a game that I really wanted to see succeed because this is Bioware. I grew up with Bioware, and yet all it does is continue to frustrate me to no end. It really is heartbreaking for me to see Bioware stumble to such an extent because I, again, grew up playing their games, and there is this image I have in my mind of who these guys are when they're at their apex, but they've just fallen so short of what they used to be lately, and yeah, I just can't help but keep wanting to express my thoughts on these kinds of developments, especially where Anthem is concerned. And keep in mind that this isn't the first time something like this has happened. We all know all the shenanigans surrounding Mass Effect Andromeda. That was a game that I was really excited about, and it disappointed to no end. And then Anthem somehow turned out worse. I don't know, it just feels like Bioware is on this downwards trend with key developers leaving, development practices somehow seemingly getting worse, games becoming less refined, the stories that they tell becoming less compelling. And we have seen other live services with rough launches, but at least with something like Fallout 76, you can say that it's now stabilized somewhat, whereas Anthem continues to be in a pretty rough shape. And a big part of that has to do with Anthem's entire roadmap getting delayed back in April 25th, 2019. They pushed back a plethora of features and new content that were supposed to be released in April, and they also pushed back the Cataclysm, the big event, the thing that was supposed to take Anthem to the next level, this thing that was supposed to be meta-changing and world-changing. So just to give you an idea for where we were before and where we are now, here's a look at what Anthem's roadmap used to look like once upon a time. As you can see, it was at one point full of life. There was something happening every month seemingly, just new free play events, new missions, new challenges, new items. And understand that people thought that this roadmap already looked pretty meager. People thought that there should be more coming to Anthem given that the game launched in the state that it did, given how lacking in content the game felt at launch. People thought this wasn't enough, but at least there was something. April in particular looked pretty compelling, as that would be the month where they would introduce an expanded progression system, brand new rewards, a bunch of free play events, legendary missions phase 2, a brand new stronghold, as well as features like leaderboards and guilds that further bolster the community aspect. And with April being followed up by the Cataclysm, this thing that's supposed to take Anthem to the next phase, people thought maybe things can get a lot better starting April and leading into May. But then on April 25th, it was officially announced that everything's been delayed, that there is nothing major coming to Anthem throughout the month of April and May. And after that announcement, the roadmap on the official website was updated to look like this. So at this point, all that remained in the roadmap was this May section featuring still the Cataclysm, as well as listings for new free play events, new missions, and new rewards. People did find this strange. Bioware said that they would delay the Cataclysm to an indefinite day and time, but because the Cataclysm was still featured in the roadmap, many thought, okay, maybe it got delayed from early May to late May or something along those lines. But as May's end drew near, people quickly realized that there is no way in hell the Cataclysm is actually coming out in May, which meant that Bioware was either too lazy or too indifferent to be able to do something as simple as update the website to more accurately portray the current state of the roadmap. I should also note that it was starting from that April 25th roadmap delay that Bioware went completely incognito, no tweets, zero interaction with the community, and it's not like people were expecting that Bioware would spill all the beans, but just minor communications, minor assurances every week. Something, anything would have been better than absolute silence. Going radio silent is one thing that Anthem couldn't afford, and yet Bioware for some reason just decided to disappear from the face of the planet while they were getting things prepped behind the scenes. Which finally brings us to the May 30th live stream, in which Bioware finally showcased what the Cataclysm is all about. They showed a glimpse of the event and the new game mode it would introduce, and suffice to say that it looks pretty underwhelming, especially when you look at what they showed back in E3 2017, or what they said about the Cataclysm closer to release date in interviews and such. And it was shortly after this May 30th live stream that Bioware updated their roadmap once again, And now, if you go to the website, you will see that the roadmap looks something like this. It is quite the depressing state of affairs. You will see that there's pretty much nothing on it at this point. All you'll find are these recurring updates that have been there since day one, and then after that, nothing. There is no roadmap left anymore, essentially, no estimates or release windows, nothing in terms of what kind of content or updates we can expect down the road. All the site shows now is a locked Act 2 and Act 3. What we have now is essentially a roadmap without a road. It's quite sad to look at. Now, granted, Bioware did say that moving forward, after the April 25th delay, they would communicate things in terms of content updates and upcoming patches closer to their launch day so that they don't promise something they can't deliver on. After all, Bioware has proven consistently that they aren't able to deliver on long-term promises, so they're saying we're just going to work on stuff behind the scenes, and when we feel they're closer to launch, when we feel like they're ready, that's when we'll say, okay, in a week or two, you're going to see this, this, and that. In Bioware's shoes, I would say this is probably for the best. They have pissed off enough people with all these broken promises, and the last thing Anthem needs right now is for Bioware to break even more of them. But then that leaves us in an awkward position where we have a tunnel with no light at the end, a game that is completely and utterly directionless, that gives people no motivation to stick around. It currently feels like Bioware is essentially building the Anthem bridge one plank in front of the other as they're going along, as they're going through the bridge. It doesn't feel like they have a vision of what's ahead, it just feels like they're looking right in front of them and just kind of winging it. This is still better than what they did before, which is leave up a roadmap that was completely inaccurate, saying that the Cataclysm would come out in May when that clearly wasn't going to happen. It's better to have no roadmap than have an inaccurate roadmap. But having no roadmap isn't some high bar to be proud of either. All we really know about the future of the game is that this Cataclysm is coming, but that within itself is a temporary event. It'll last a couple weeks and then it will go away. And while Jesse Anderson did tease that aspects of the Cataclysm will remain as permanent content, he's being very vague about it, and vagueness is the last thing Anthem needs right now. It needs a clear direction. I don't know, I personally think it would be better if they updated the roadmap so that they show you some of the stuff they have planned, but put a TBD label on it instead of giving it a month. That way you can at least give existing players some reason to stay, something to look forward to, even if it is ways down the line and the release window is undetermined. Either way, regardless of how they handle this whole situation, what we are looking at here is Exhibit A of how roadmaps can fall apart so quickly and how roadmaps can be exploited by publishers by using them as an excuse to rush out games so that players can act as beta testers who paid full price for a game they expected to be fully complete. The concept of roadmaps isn't inherently bad, especially for developers who do adhere to it, who treat roadmaps seriously. There are roadmaps you feel like you can trust because they have been so consistently on point. But as for other studios, instead of using roadmaps as they're intended to be used, a means to build upon an already complete foundation, so how a game like Division 2 does it, the roadmap is being used to ship a foundation that is under construction, and what the roadmap is essentially an explanation of how they're going to finish the foundation in a year or two. This harkens back to what Todd Howard said in a recent interview with IGN. He sort of celebrated this notion of game launches not mattering as much because what matters is how games end up, and because there's always the chance of a game with a rough launch making a strong comeback.
All of the games like this, whether it's us or somebody else, you can go back and look at them. There's a period once you launch. It's not how you launch, it's what it becomes.
But I'll repeat what I've said before, which is that you can have both a great launch and great post-launch. Why does it have to be one or the other? Yes, the general trend is that live services tend to have a shitty launch that may culminate in a recovery after a lot of post-launch updates and content, but that doesn't mean that's a trend you should normalize and encourage. Instead, what developers should strive for is to break that cycle, to go above and beyond this trend, buck the trend, and reinforce the more moral mentality of putting all you have into a game's release. Treat your game's initial release like it's the last game you're ever gonna make, and ensure that it's got a full game's worth of content with no design compromises. Otherwise, you're gonna get day one buyers who are gonna be understandably pissed that they're not getting their money's worth until months or years down the line, and what you're gonna get is a live service whose momentum is heavily compromised. But Anthem feels like a more special case in that their roadmap, which is part of the marketing campaign of this game, part of the reason people bought Anthem, is this expectation of things to come. That roadmap just didn't come close to panning out, at the very least with Destiny 2, despite an initial rough first few launch months. Once they got their shit together, once they introduced that roadmap, for the most part, they adhered to it, they treated it seriously, and whenever there were delays here and there, the development team communicated that, and they eventually got the ball rolling to a point where Destiny 2 was in an adequate state. I should also note that while Destiny 2 is in a much better place now, there was a huge loss of momentum because of those rough launch months, and so when they released major expansions and such, while the remaining players were very happy, they didn't draw in a lot of new players, and that resulted in Activision Blizzard being disappointed in the game's performance. People who left just decided, you know, there's better stuff out there, that they're not going to come back. There's only one chance to make a good first impression, and Destiny 2 is a prime example of why that matters. That bad first impression meant that a lot of players left, and the community is weaker for it, even if the game's better now. But with all that said, with Destiny 2, you always sort of had an idea of what's to come, but the same couldn't be said for Anthem now that they have deleted the roadmap. Players are now forced to essentially wave their arms around in the dark, hoping that they stumble upon something. Now, it should be noted that there is some stuff happening with Anthem. It was recently announced that on June 4th, they would be releasing a public test server for the upcoming Cataclysm event, so that is something that existing players can look forward to, at least if you are a PC player and have Origin Access Premier subscription. I myself do intend to dive back into the game and see what this Cataclysm thing is all about, see if it's able to breathe new life into the game, and get that coverage out for you guys, just to keep you guys informed, especially for console players out there who are not going to be able to gain access to a public test server, because BioWare is only doing that for PC. Based on what I've seen, it certainly doesn't look like it'll be what will save Anthem. It doesn't look like what Reaper of Souls was to Diablo 3, or what Taken King was to Destiny, which is what people were hoping the Cataclysm would be. But, you know, I've only seen glimpses of Cataclysm. Maybe I'll get a better idea. Maybe I'll have better impressions when I actually get my hands on it. But again, very skeptical. In the meantime, though, I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on BioWare wiping out their entire roadmap and leaving it the way it is now in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.